you should know that these are drugs. Sugar has been shown in a couple of different ways to be more addictive than cocaine and heroin.
What is the thing or things that you've had to quit in order to become successful?
I certainly had to quit
Thinking it was too
the
big.
person that I was to get here.
being afraid that I was going to make mistakes. I quickly learned that the road to success is paved with failure.
Would you rather go to a casino or to an opera performance?
Well, I used to say I would have been easy. I'd rather go to the opera. But I've recently, well, during COVID, figured out that opera is just too tragic. It's too awful. And so today I think I'd rather go to the casino.
Okay.
Yep.
Would you rather live in a beautiful farm-like home with a white picket fence or a penthouse in a modern building?
Well, I actually do live in a modern building, not the penthouse, but I work very hard. I've been working to help people stop the suffering of processed foods for 28 years. I chose to live in a high rise because it's less work. I don't have to maintain the property. The building maintains the building, and all I have to do is maintain my little apartment.
Most definitely. And it feels like it's a lot safer as well. Sometimes more outside of the bigger cities, it's probably safer as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point.
Would you rather have, for brunch, would you rather have a mimosa or hot coffee?
I couldn't choose either of those. I don't do alcohol or caffeine. So I would just have a glass of water. I know that's not very exciting, but that keeps me safe.
Well, it's exciting when you know that this just brings you health. It just helps you to continue to nurture your body.
Yeah.
Thank
exactly.
you guys. Thank you so very much for tuning in for another episode of Successful Quitters, a podcast that highlights the things individuals have had to quit in order to become successful in their arena. I am Sara Nunez Bee, your host, and today I have the pleasure of introducing to you someone that is very knowledgeable. She has a Ph.D. in addictive nutrition from Union Institute, an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. She has 28 years of direct coaching of processed food addicts. She's also lead editor, author of the textbook Processed Food Addiction, selected by the Oprah Winfrey Network as food addiction specialist, fellow of the American College of Nutrition, and innovator in food addiction recovery programs. Welcome, Joan Ifland, Dr. Joan Ifland.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. I'm very grateful to be here.
I'm extremely grateful that you're here. Joan, let's go back to the beginning of all of this. How was you at around 5 years old? Where were you at, and how was your upbringing?
So I was living in the suburbs of Cincinnati with my brother and sister and my parents. My dad was a scientist, a biochemist with a consumer goods company where he spent his whole career. And he went to work every day, and I went to school, and it was just a typical suburban life.
Did you have siblings back then?
I had an older sister and a younger brother.
Okay. And what are the activities that you enjoy the most back then?
Well, I was already addicted to processed foods. My whole family was affected by them. We did baking. We made our own processed foods. In the 1950s, people tended to make their own processed foods. We didn't tend to buy processed foods from the store. So we did baking. We did cooking. And we made our own sweets. And otherwise, we lived in a very new development.
Yeah.
And the fields, the farm fields around us were going back to nature. So we did a lot of roaming around in those fields. It was a
Cool.
great gift to have that much nature nearby.
Yeah.
We could
Yeah, and
access,
zero technology too. That was
yeah.
in a way some other gift. And who was your favorite person?
Oh my gosh. At that time, it likely would have been Lassie. I probably didn't have a
Oh,
favorite person, but I really did love Lassie.
oh, very
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
And when you got older and went to high school, were you still living in the same area?
No, my parents moved closer into town when I was in sixth grade. So I went to a city high school. I went to Walnut Hills High School, which is it's a magnet school, and it runs from seventh grade through 12. So I did middle school and high school in the same building with the same kids.
Nice. And were you the kind of teenager in high school that had a lot of friends, or did you keep to yourself? How was it then?
Well, I lived in a traumatic household. Both of my parents, I think they were just in over their heads, and it was sometimes violent. They were yelling, and my parents were very self-centered and very appearance oriented. So it was not a nurturing household. I've gotten a lot of nurturing now because I run an online community for people who want to quit processed foods or drugs or alcohol. And there's a lot of nurturing there. There's a lot of kindness and compassion and understanding and patience and wisdom and skill building. So now I'm okay. But in high school, even though I would have been considered to be popular, I didn't ever feel like I belonged because I never got that initial feeling of belonging in my family of origin. I didn't know what that felt like. So I was president of my little high school sorority, and I was on the dance team, which was prestigious. I always had a date for whatever I needed to go to. I had one very special friend, Rod Pennington, who was really my bud, but I was not close to a lot of people. I
Mm,
didn't want them to see. My parents were very, very critical, and they
yeah.
made me feel defective. So for a long time, I didn't want to get close to people because I was afraid that they would see that I was defective, and they would agree with my parents and be critical and rejecting and ridicule me and so on. So I wouldn't say that aside from my friend Rod, that I had any really close friends. I mean, there are people that I see when I go back, but very few, very few.
Would you think that part of the reason why you are helping so many people with your communities would the fact that it was hard, your upbringing was a little bit harsher, be one of the reasons for which you are giving back now or giving now?
Absolutely, absolutely. When I first got off of sugar and flour, I quit sugar and flour in 1996, so 28 years ago. Uh, my raging stopped. I was a rager. I mean, I could go from peaceful to screaming in a few seconds. I was doing a lot of things to make that stop. I had these two lovely children and a husband, and I did not want to be yelling at them. But sometimes I would just find, yelling coming out of my mouth, and I would almost step to the side and watch myself doing it and wish it would stop. So I gave up sugar and flour to lose weight, and I was very surprised at the number of things that got better. The cravings for food stopped, lifelong cravings. bloating,
Mm.
brain fog, fatigue, allergies, a lifelong sinus infection. But when in the third week I realized I hadn't been yelling in 3 weeks, I
Wow.
adopted this as a career. And then I knew that it was a major factor in my parents' inability to control their behavior. So I committed. I can tell you it was January 18th. I'm standing in my kitchen in Houston, Texas, 1996, when I committed my life to sharing with people the extraordinary damage that processed foods are doing to them.
How interesting it is that one has to pay certain consequences to be able to give others the gift of knowledge so that they don't go through the same thing.
Yeah.
What was it that you had chosen as a major at first? You graduated high school, and what path had you taken?
So my undergraduate degree from Oberlin College is in economics and political science. My first
So
job
different.
out of college was for a state legislature, Wisconsin state legislature, as a fiscal analyst for the what was called the Joint Finance Committee. So we analyzed spending proposals and then made recommendations on them. But then I decided I did not want to work in government, and I went to business school to make the transition to business. And then out of business school, I worked for a big Fortune 200 holding company on their finance staff in New York City. So I I know that sounds like an odd background for somebody to get into a nutrition related field, but processed food addiction is not really a nutrition field. It's really not at all a nutrition field. It's much more like being in alcoholism recovery. I mean, I think of
Yeah.
sugar as being like crystallized alcohol. So it's actually a perfect background because millions, hundreds of millions, even billions of people around the world are now suffering from processed food addiction from the time when the tobacco industry came into processed foods. They bought Kraft, Nabisco, and General Foods in 3 short years, 1985 to 19, and they brought a particular business model with them. It's the addiction business model. And they used it to addict 2/3 of American adults to nicotine. They were getting beat up in the courts. They didn't have a profitable business anymore. So they just slid right over into processed foods.
Yeah.
And you need to have a business orientation to understand what happened. And you need to have a government orientation to understand why our government is not protecting us from this. So it turns out that a business background and a political science background are essential to understand why today 84% of Americans are overweight, obese, or severely obese, and Americans are eating 73% of their food in processed food like substances. It looks like they're eating, it's being sold in the grocery store as if it were food, but the brain is reacting like it's a drug.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's insane. So
it
you
is.
went from that into, you continued your life, you had your children, you got married, and then you come to this point where you find that everything you've been eating, the way you've been eating, has been wrong all your life. And because by mistake or by the fact that you wanted to lose weight, you feel better, you feel
Yeah,
healthier,
yeah, and acted better.
and
This is the
acted
thing that I
better.
really want everybody to know is depression, irritability, anxiety, shame, raging, All of those things are related to processed foods. They all derange the pleasure pathways in the brain, dopamine and serotonin and opioid and cannabinoid. Because they're different substances mixed together, they derange. They either, they're either creating a super big wave, a flood of cravings, or they get depleted and you stop being able to feel pleasure.
Yeah. How, which is, I think, one of the basic, most important subjects within this is how does food affect our toddlers? Because what I noticed with my nephews is that once they're being given healthier food, they behave better. There are less tantrums. They feel better. They sleep better. Basics that we should know about food and toddlers.
It's in all children. You should know that these are drugs. Sugar has been shown in a couple of different ways to be more addictive than cocaine and heroin. And the research is that if you touch a taste bud with a sugar taste, it will create a response in dopamine in half a second. That's faster. It's faster than heroin. It's faster than cocaine. It's the fastest response. And that's one of the ways that researchers determine the relative addictivity of drugs. So those poor toddlers, like everybody else, they are getting a surge if they eat processed foods, particularly refined carbohydrates. So sugars, any kind of sweetener, and flour. They get a surge of blood glucose, which is life threatening. And the body, the pancreas, will release a lot of insulin to get that blood glucose down to a safe level. But usually the pancreas overreacts, and instead of just going down to a safe level, the glucose drops. And then you have panic, you have rage, you have depression. It's just awful. And a toddler will yeah, throw a tantrum. And then, but the addicted brain of the toddler now that it's addictive and it's craving these substances all the time, it has the little kiddo has to go through withdrawal in order to quit.
Yeah.
So if you want your toddler to get off of processed foods, you have to go through at least 4 days of screaming and yelling and your toddler telling you they hate you and you're the worst parents ever, and really pretty dreadful things to get a
Yeah.
toddler off of processed foods.
And also because if they go to daycare, then a lot of times they are given food in daycares. If they visit family, they can be given foods there that
Yeah.
once again trigger that necessity to eat those things that they shouldn't be eating. So,
It's so
how do
bad.
you? I know, I know. How do you suggest that you, if women are having their kids in daycare and eating that extra food, how do you suggest that they manage the rest of the time with the food themselves?
Well, my kids were 11 and 12 years old when I discovered this, and I discovered that they were causing raging in me. I quickly decided that they were causing irritability and fighting and oppositional behavior in my kids. And I'm not going to try to control my kids at school. But what I did do was I made them, when they left the house, anytime they left the house, they had enough food with them to last until I would see them again. And so that's one piece, is you're not going to put your child in a position of either going hungry or eating something that they know will make them hurt. So that's not fair. That's totally not fair. So I developed a system in my household where I cooked all the proteins and the starches on the weekends. And then during the week, all I had to do was pull out something from the freezer, thaw it the night before, and put it into lunch boxes. So you have to have a system of food production,
Yeah.
or you have to
And
know which restaurants make clean food, and there aren't very many of them. But you can.
yeah,
Like
that's a good point.
a Mexican restaurant, if you order fajitas, don't get the chips. You will have a protein. You'll have shrimp, or you'll have chicken, or you'll have steak. You'll have a protein in that order. And you'll have vegetables. You'll have the grilled vegetables, and then if there are any fresh, like fresh shredded lettuce on top. And you will have the starch. So you will have beans and rice. So if you
Mm.
are if you're dependent on fast food, and there are more and more people who have been raised in fast food households, until you get through withdrawal, until you develop some skills around producing your own food, just get the fajita platters. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And moving on to everybody else, because this is for everyone. When it comes to sugars, are we also counting fruit sugars? Are there any fruits that we should stay away from so
Well,
that
this is
we don't really?
something, at this point, we've been under this incredible assault. It's in a kind of an assault on the brain from the processed food industry. They've been manipulating us and deceiving us for 40 years. And so most people have this pretty severely at this point, severe cravings, severe enough to overpower the frontal lobe again and again. Like, I'm on a diet today. I'm not eating that. By 10 o'clock, you're eating it. No, I really need to lose some weight. I'm not going to eat this. And then you're eating it. No, I have diabetes. I'm going to try to fix it through diet, but you can't. And and then the deception is somehow this is your fault. This is not your fault. I want all your listeners to know that if you've tried to give up processed foods, you tried to give up sugar, you tried to give up flour, you've tried to give up artificial sweeteners, you've tried to give up caffeine, you've tried to give up excessive salt, salty snacks, you've tried to give up dairy, you've tried to give up excessive fat. It's not your fault that it hasn't worked. It's not your fault that you're lapsing. This by now, these are very, very deeply seated cravings, and you need to be in a program that is going to support the rewiring of your whole brain.
Mm.
Because I was conceived in an addicted brain. My mother was eating processed foods. My grandfather owned a candy store, and I never got to withdrawal until I was 44 years old. And I think what actually happened is I switched the addiction to dairy, because we were not told to give up dairy. So
Mm.
people have a vast range of sensitivity. So start with the high sugar fruits like bananas, guava, cherries, grapes, mango. Those are high sugar fruits. If those fruits give you cravings, then don't eat them. But then you can go on to like some of the lower sugar fruits, like berries, like blueberries and blackberries, like even raspberries. And you can keep trying, go up the ladder to apples and pears, and then oranges, or the stone fruit like peaches and plums.
Yeah.
I can't have pineapple in my house. I can't have it in my house. It doesn't make any difference whether it's in my house or not, because I'll eat it immediately, and all of it, whatever's there.
Yeah,
But I can.
I'm a sweet tooth. But now that we're talking about this, that's why it's so important, because your health is your wealth. So a lot of times everything nowadays is business, money, 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 but we
Oh my
cannot make
gosh.
money, do
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
without being healthy.
Yeah.
And the basics to be healthy is eating well. Obviously exercising and all that good stuff, but if we don't know what we shouldn't eat, then how can we actually prepare to succeed?
Sarah, you're right on target. You cannot exercise away a bad diet. Like you can't exercise away cocaine addiction. You can't
Yeah.
exercise away processed food addiction. This is part of the big deception, is that somehow this is a weight issue. It's not an issue of how much fat tissue is on your body. It's an issue of how easily your brain floods with cravings and
Mm.
overpowers your braking system, your rational thought. That's the issue.
Yeah, it can't be stronger than you or than
Mm-hmm.
your will.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happens to me when I think chocolate, milk chocolate. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to be conscious of the fact that this is bad for you, and that we can be better and experience a better lifestyle if we make different choices,
Well,
you
you have to
know?
be
And
careful, Sarah, about that phrase of choices. Choices are made by a very specific group of brain cells in the frontal lobe, but the frontal lobe is tiny. It's just kind of like
mm,
this veneer of very intelligent brain cells pasted on the front of our brains. But if you're an evolutionist, your midbrain and your primitive brain are running your life. Here's how addictions work. So the processed food industry used its business practices to train all four pathways in the brain, the craving pathways or the pleasure pathways, to respond to triggers, food stimulation, reminders, signals, prompts, cues, whatever you call it, anything that's associated with the substance, and in this case, it's a whole group of substances, anything associated, any reminder will cause those pathways to erupt with a flood of cravings. Now,
mm,
two terrible things happen in that moment. One, there's so much craving transmitter that it goes directly across the midbrain to the behavior centers and controls them. So if you've ever had that experience where you don't want to eat something, but you're doing the zombie walk, you're going out to the kitchen to get it. No, I'm done eating for the day, but your body is walking out
yeah.
there and you're picking up something processed. That's what's happened. The midbrain that was formed 3 million years ago, that part of the brain has gotten control of your behavior. When you get, that's one thing that happens, you get all this craving neurotransmitter. But the other piece of it is that all of the blood going to run the cravings and the behavior, there's nothing left for the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is not involved in survival. It's the least greatest priority for a human brain. The blood flow is always going to go to the survival pathways in the brain. Craving pathway is now, it's literally pulling the blood away from the frontal lobe. So when you're reaching for those processed foods, you're not in the decision making part of your brain. That part of the brain has
Mm,
crashed. That computer is not taking any
off.
data in and it's not putting any data out. It has absolutely no control over your behavior. You are not making a choice. You are being, a craving has reached up and just pulled you down, and as a craving is controlling your behavior. So I just want people to know that. I want them so badly to know that
This
you
is such
have
amazing, powerful
cravings.
information, Dr. Joan.
Yes.
This is very, very powerful because, like I said, I'll just make different choices. But if I'm unable to make different choices, then I go back to the same thing, and then I let myself down
Then
without
yes, you start
need
blaming
to.
yourself, which is just, the cascade of suffering from this is just, it's so painful, and people's self-esteem just evaporates. They have no self-esteem, no self-respect, no self affection, or no self-compassion, no self-kindness, because the
Yeah.
culture is gaslighting them. The culture, gaslighting just means the culture is saying something is true when it's not. The culture is saying, oh, that's your fault. That is not true. Nobody ever called me up and said, hey, would you like to have a really severe cravings disorder for processed foods that will cripple your cell functions in 8 ways and just make you absolutely crazy? I never agreed to that. Our
Yeah.
government let the processed food industry sneak this addiction up on us, and that is not my fault.
Yeah,
It's not your fault.
absolutely. I mean, you watch TV, and if you like hamburgers, you are going to get a hamburger right after you watched one episode of whatever it is that you like watching. You go
Right.
to the movie theaters, you're going to find
Absolutely.
what you shouldn't eat. So it's everywhere. How can you not? But
Yeah.
how could we somehow at least start? Is it would the key be to be prepared before the cravings happen,
Okay,
or
so
how do you?
it takes a lot of training. It actually takes a lot of training to live differently from the culture. So you have the industries triggering us all the time, stimulating this flood of cravings. And it takes a whole skill set to learn how to, like I just know I can't go to the grocery store right now. I can't go into a triggering environment right now. I need to like do some meditation, calm my brain, and then I can go.
Mhm.
So that's a skill set. And we should also talk about stress. So there's another pathway back here that's very, very close to the craving pathways, which is the stress pathway. And they're kind of in a dance. It's a nice thing that our brains created for us, our creator created for us, that that you're really stressed out, your brain will start to produce dopamine to make you feel better. And
Mhm.
conversely, if you're euphoric, like you are spaced out because your brain is packed with dopamine, your stress pathways will activate to try to bring you back down to earth so that, if a saber-toothed tiger leaps out, you will be able to defend yourself. So, stress activates cravings. And people say, oh, well, I don't watch the commercials on TV. That helps, but it's the stressful programming itself.
Mhm.
It's people being mean to each other. It's people killing each other. It's violence. It's, explosions. All of those things are kicking up that dopamine production. All of those things are contributing to a flood of cravings. So you have a whole skill set that you need for stress management. And like the biggest source of stress, or a big source of stress, is relationships. So we teach a whole communication system where you can calm another person, and and prevent them from stressing you out. This is a whole skill set. So the short answer is our communities, our online communities, which can be found at foodaddictionreset.com. Start by taking the self quiz. These are the 11 signs of addictions, and people are generally shocked to find out that the processed food industry has given them a severe, I'll call it a cravings disorder. Addiction's a really strong word, but a cravings disorder such that cravings are overpowering rational thought.
And
So, but
this
that also
makes,
opens the door. It opens the door to getting the right level of help.
yeah, this makes a lot of sense because it is like having an addiction.
It
If you
is.
are drinking too much, you get into a group and you all support one another. You hear the stories that, make you rethink things.
Uh
And
huh.
you also learn tools to stay away from what will hurt you. How does this food situation, talking about cravings, has this have to do with pregnancy?
Oh, that's such a good question. processed foods are inflammatory. Processed foods inflame every cell in the body. And so processed foods inflame our reproductive systems. And when your ovaries are inflamed, they might not be able to produce eggs very well. If your fallopian tube is inflamed, that egg might not be able to pass down that fallopian tube. And so it's happened a couple of times in the 28 years that I've been doing this, that somebody who couldn't get pregnant came into our programs, got off the processed foods, and got pregnant. And it's just A plus B equals C. So that's one thing. The next thing is that when we're pregnant, when women are pregnant, the fetus is developing. The first time it develops a smell cell, so a cell that's going to become a nose, that cell goes over and starts to sample the amniotic fluid. Why? Because her creator has just thought of everything. When that baby's born, you want that baby to choose the foods that are available in the environment. So the baby is learning what the mother is eating. And when the baby is born, it will be born with a preference for those foods. Breast milk will taste like those foods. The baby will want that breast milk, and it all works out. If the mother is eating processed foods, that baby will be born with a preference for processed foods. And it's fair to say that the baby will already be sugar, flour, gluten, salt, dairy, fat, caffeine, food additives, addicted. Now, if a baby is born to a mother who's been using drugs, that baby gets to go through withdrawal. But a baby born to a mother using processed foods doesn't even get 1 day of their entire life without the numbing, mood-altering, depressing lethargy of processed foods. There are people dying today who have never spent 1 day of their life knowing how much fun and joyful it is to be a human, because they've been numbed out for their entire life. They've eaten processed foods every day, and they've been numbed out for their whole life. And that is a tragedy.
Yeah. And one of the things, definitely, the nutrients that come, I'm pretty sure that the nutrition of the fetus is a lot better also. That they become stronger without the processed foods. And because this is such an important thing, how do you suggest that people work within their budget to purchase foods that might be healthier for them? Because a lot of people say, look, I would love, and I've heard this so much, I would love to eat so healthy and organic and this and that, but it's expensive. So I don't.
That's part of the delusion. So one element of the addiction business model is deceptive advertising. So for cigarettes, they say, oh, cigarettes are sexy. Well, can you imagine anything more repulsive than a cigarette? It's like the last thing you would think of, sex. Cigarettes are rebellious. Cigarettes are masculine. The whole Marlboro cowboy deception. Well, we know today that cigarettes are deadly. They're cancerous.
Yeah.
So you just take that list of deceptions and you say, oh, processed foods are cheap. Dollar meals. Well, processed foods means that you are too tired and sick to work. So you might lose a whole lifetime of income. Younger and younger people are going on disability because of obesity, diabetes, depression, fatigue. You might lose a whole lifetime of income. That is not cheap. You might not be able to get to the career that you want because you're tired and you're obese, or you're overweight, or you're craving all the time and you can't think straight. So that the loss of income can be incredible. So that's not a cheap food. You might not be able to take a part-time job. Maybe you don't want to work, but you can't even do dog walking or babysitting. So the loss of income is huge. You might have co-pays on drugs, on pharmaceuticals, or special doctor's offices. You might have a medical crisis like cancer or diabetes. You might have amputations. I mean, that is expensive. That's loss of capabilities. So you have all that lying. That's just bold-faced lying that the processed foods are inexpensive. And then if you turn around, a cup of lentils and a cup of organic lentils and a cup of organic brown rice is 60 cents.
Absolutely. Most
Yeah.
definitely.
And that's super, super nourishing, and it's filling. And if you can put a couple of carrots with that, great. Or a nice red pepper with it, that's great. That's a fantastic meal.
When it comes to rice, do you suggest that white rice is not the best option?
Right. White rice is not the best
If it's
option because the
jasmine, for
fibers.
example?
Yeah, the fiber has been taken off of it. The difference between processed foods and real food is that the carbohydrate from a processed food, it gets into your system all at once because the fiber's been taken out, because it's been turned into a powder or a liquid or a syrup, and it's been heated to a high temperature, so there's not very much chewing. You just swallow it, and boom, it's in your bloodstream. You get the dopamine high, and you get the glucose high, then you get the crash. The crash is terrible, so you're reaching for it again. It's just a mess. So you do want to eat brown rice, red rice, black rice, purple rice. There's all kinds of beautiful rices out there.
Anything that is not that processed. And in your belief and knowledge, does food regenerate the body?
Oh my gosh. Processed foods are killing the body. The cells are inflamed, and their ability to take in glucose runs every cell in the body. Their ability to take in glucose is impaired. That's insulin resistance. They have a lot of trash inside the cell. This byproducts from processing all this fat and sugar. And when you build up trash in the cell, then the workers in the cell, they're called mitochondria. They cannot move around the cell. And so the cell's not being repaired. And then, various other things are going on. It's glycation and oxidative stress and things that are hard for me to explain. The cell is aging more quickly. That's the sad part of it. So the toddler you were talking about, every cell in that toddler is stressed. But the fun part about it is that when you get off of the processed foods, it just goes away. You got to do two things. You got to get off the processed foods, and you got to live in a stress-free environment. So our online communities, we teach people, step by step, slowly, as you're ready, because it's a long list of things to get off. You're going to get off the processed foods. You're going to learn from some skills about how to tell other people that you don't want that, whatever it is they're offering you, and yet remain friendly with them, et cetera, et cetera. As I said earlier, there's a whole lots of skills that go with eating very differently from other people, and all those communication skills so that other people can't stress you out. Sleep skills. If you get enough sleep, your cravings go down. Walking, like prioritizing walking instead of watching TV. Avoiding sources of stress like mainstream entertainment. Yeah, but it's very doable. It's very doable. We see it done every day in our community. But if you do those two things, get off the processed foods and get into a very kind, compassionate, gentle, but smart, skill building community, it's pretty cool what things just go away. The medical industry is profiting from this so much. They don't, and they don't have the skills. The medical industry doesn't have the skills to affect lifestyle change. I have applied
Yeah.
for a patent for our community because we've seen so many different incurable diseases go into remission.
Hmm.
So I want all your listeners to have great, great hope. Maybe you've gotten a diagnosis. Oh, you have to take this medication for the rest of your life, and the medication has painful side effects. Or you have to you're just going to have to live with that pain. Or, anxiety and depression, they're saying, well, that's no longer curable. You're going to be on medication for the rest of your life. That's not true. Or now they're even saying obesity is not curable. That's totally not true. You just have to be you just have to be comforted and protected and then trained in how to keep the sick culture from making you sick.
Yeah.
All that
Well,
stuff is great to open.
they're saying obesity is not curable because there are medicines that they're selling you so that they, take care of that, which are medicines that are making you sicker, that give you more issues than just the obesity. There's
Exactly.
something going on nowadays that I wanted to ask you about that's very, very common, which is fasting.
Oh my
And
God.
I wanted to know your perspective between intermittent fasting
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
dry fasting,
Thank you.
because I have met people that are fasting 1, 2, up to 3 days on a dry fast. So, meaning no water and no food. And if you go online, most of the feedback that you get is this regenerates cells. But also, if you really look in depth, it'll say, there are things that could go very wrong. So, what's your take on this?
So I'm a researcher. If you don't mind, I'm gonna hold up the textbook. This is the
Please do.
textbook. It took me 3 years full time to track down the studies for this book, but I did discover that at this point, the research shows that most people are suffering from severe addiction, and that's why nothing is working. So none of the weight loss programs work, and it's also that we've been deeply traumatized by this experience of having this dreadful condition and having the medical industry deny its existence. Like you ask a doctor about food addiction, they'll say, "Oh, no, that doesn't exist." So fasting activates dopamine. So there are two kind of schools of thought about why that might happen. Your body doesn't know fasting. Your body does know starvation because there have been plenty of times on the earth, even it's happening in some places in the world right now where people are starving to death. And in the 1950s, when I was growing up, there were famines. There were famines in Biafra, and there were famines I think, in Pakistan. So fear of famine is a huge issue for the human brain. And so there are two possibilities. Why would fasting kick up dopamine? Why could you get high off of starvation? Well, one is it could just that if you're going to starve to death, the creator is going to give you some comfort, pain relief, if you will. And the other possibility is that the brain is desperately trying to get you to go get food. So it's creating cravings that overwhelm rational thought, and it wants you to get out there and find some food. So here's the research. This is done by Eric Stice, who is now at Stanford University. Really powerful, very simple research. He took a group of, I think they were, different ages, women, girls, and he said, tell me what you're eating. Yeah, right now. Are you dieting? Are you fasting? So he collected all that data, and then he waited 5 years, and then he went back to the same group of people, and he said, "Okay, tell me how you're doing right now." Well, the people who had been dieting and fasting 5 years later had binge eating disorder, bulimia, anorexia.
Hmm.
So you're taking an addicted brain You're taking your brain that's already looking for outside sources to create those dopamine floods, and you're giving it starvation. And that addictive brain says, oh, great, a new way to get high, not eating. Well, that's the beginning of anorexia. Anorexia is the most fatal mental illness out there. It's incredibly dangerous. So the other thing that could happen is that now you're waking up the food seeking brain. This is the primitive brain. We've been talking about the craving brain up here in the midbrain, but now we're going back into the primitive brain. And this is famine, food seeking based on fear of famine. And that will also override the frontal lobe. Now, when you have famine and you're a primitive person, we've been evolving for 7 million years, you find food, you eat it. You eat it as fast as you can. You eat it all. Because the reason why you want to eat it so fast is because you're a small animal. Humans are small mammals. And we can be eaten for lunch by a whole range of wild animals. We can also be kidnapped by a neighboring tribe. So you don't want to ever stay in one place for too long, because the predators will smell you and they'll start creeping up on you. But you do want to eat everything that's there, because it's probably in a famine situation, it's probably not going to be that much. You eat it as fast as you can. Then you run away and hide. Now, here's what you don't do, is you don't share it with your tribe. So this is an exception to the rule where the tribe looks for food together, the tribe shares the food, and this is how everybody survives. In a famine, your survival is better off by eating all the food yourself and not letting anybody else know that you've done that. So you want to go and hide. You don't want your tribe to see that you ate all the food and you didn't share it. They could kick you out of the tribe and then you would die. So when you think about what is binge eating, that's what it is. Binge eating is you find food, you eat it as fast as you can, as much as you can, and then you run and hide. And you're ashamed of yourself, and you don't want anybody to see you. That's binge eating disorder.
It's been so common. Everyone speaking about fasting, that is very important to get this message out there.
Thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely, because if we go from eating processed food to what you're suggesting that we do, which is healthy, clean eating,
real food, unprocessed foods,
real food, then we are going to lose weight and feel better anyway without having to do the fasting. Yeah.
Dieting is in the same boat as fasting. People who repeatedly don't eat enough, it's restricted calorie dieting, they also end up with binge eating disorder and then bulimia, because they're desperate not to gain the weight from these episodes of binge eating. And so then they're purging it. It's just nasty. And the culture keeps supporting it. The culture keeps pushing it. So, Sarah, I'm just really, really grateful that you're getting this message out.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of this is lack of information, Dr. Ifland. A lot of it is so much lack of information that it's crazy, because once someone starts fasting, then you're like, oh, look at that person, maybe I should do it. And you look for the information that looks convenient, but you leave everything else aside, behind, in the back burner. And you don't see the negatives of these things. And these steps could change your life.
I've looked through the most popular fasting books. The word dopamine does not appear in the book. It's horrifying. Yeah. It's so irresponsible not to look at what happens in the brain in an addicted population. You know, by now, as I said, I think well over 80% of Americans are suffering from a severe cravings disorder 1.6 million Americans will die from diet-related diseases. That is 4 times worse than the worst year of COVID. Worst year of COVID in the United States was about 400,000 people. It's 1.6 million people every year. And as you were starting to say, you don't see the media with their screaming headlines. No.
Oh,
The screaming headlines about COVID are not there for the diet-related diseases. And all you have to do is
yeah.
look through whatever it is, and there are all the advertisements for processed foods and pharmaceuticals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. When it comes to milk, I have 1,000 more questions, but we're only going to have time for this one because you're giving us so much good information. If anything, we can all go to your website and sign up for one of your groups so that we can be coached and get to a better place with our nutrition. But when it comes to milks, there's whole milk, oat milk, almond milk. What is good?
None of it. So if you take an almond and you convert it into a white liquid, you've processed that. The body has no idea what that is. Same thing with oat milk. And dairy is a substance. Let's just think about this carefully. Dairy right out of the cow, raw milk, organic, doesn't make any difference. It's got enough casomorphine in it to put a 100-pound baby calf to sleep.
Hmm.
All breast milk, even human breast milk, has casomorphine in it. The baby feeds, and then the baby is supposed to go to sleep and stay still to absorb nutrients. So adults, like, no, that's like, no,
Those.
don't do that to
And
me.
how do you replenish the baby human with calcium if they don't grow up with milk? Or is that something that we're just sold and that's not
Yeah,
as necessary?
it's another gross deception. A bone actually needs 8 different minerals in order to remineralize itself. And calcium's only one of them. But nobody's like pushing magnesium or potassium or any of those other ones. It is true that sugar, as it goes through the body, leaches out some of those minerals, which is why we have osteoporosis. But the calcium thing is just something that the dairy industry made up. In fact, there's a really interesting study out of Sweden showing that the more dairy products a Swede eats, the more likely they are to have a broken bone. So you
Oh,
just,
wow.
you know,
Yeah,
pretty
and it's in my
scary.
mind is it's scary to think, but it's the way we're raised. For me, I'm thinking, but if you're my nephew, for example, that drinks milk every single day, I'm thinking if you take the milk away, then what if there are nutrients that are necessary? But
No,
it's the way
all
we've been.
plants and animal meats, plants and animal products have a whole range of, they have all the minerals that a bone needs. There's nothing special about calcium any more so than magnesium or potassium or any of the other 8 minerals that a bone needs. It's just it happens to be
Yeah.
in milk, and there happens to be a dairy industry, and the Dairy Council is just like the Tobacco Institute. It is there to pump out deceptive messaging to get you to buy a product.
And one last question, I promise. When I just quickly, just for older, the elderly, because I know bones are a thing now that we're bringing it up. What would you suggest as far as, would you suggest that you hit 50s or 60s and you take this certain vitamin, or what kind of food can they actually strengthen these bones with?
Oh, just eat a good variety of unprocessed foods, vegetables, starches like sweet potatoes and brown rice and millet. Millet's a great grain. The gluten-free grains. We didn't talk very much about gluten, but gluten contains a gluteomorphine, and it does seem to activate the opioid pathway in the brain. So just stay away from gluten. Gluten's kind of easy to give up. Eat quinoa and eat beans. Eat all the different kinds of beans, for heaven's sakes, please. And all the different plants. And then the lower sugar fruits. The food is beautiful. If people want to see pictures of the food, go to our Facebook group, Food Addiction Education the food. And I post a lot of my meal pictures over there. There's sweet potatoes and ground beef and carrots and celery and onion stir fried with chicken, and just really, really, the food is beautiful, very colorful.
So basically,
very pleasant.
just food is to recap. Healthy food, clean food is the only thing we need to regenerate everything and to stay healthy.
And to be out of stressful environments.
And
stress
to be
is
out of
very
stressful.
damaging to the body.
Dr. Ifland, what are the things that you've had to quit in order to become the you now?
I had to quit processed foods. I had to quit alcohol. I had to quit recreational drugs. I had to quit cigarettes. I had to quit stressful behaviors. And I had to quit the delusion that our culture is putting out about it.
Wow. Good for you. Definitely. You're definitely a successful quitter. And I thank you so much for being here with us and giving us all these golden nuggets.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, and thank you for getting this message out to people. Go to our website, Food Addiction Reset.
Yes,
we also have trainings. If you're a health professional and you're frustrated because you can't get your patients to change their diet, please come to us. We will train you on how to talk to them and how to get them the right support. Even if you've tried 100 weight loss programs and they've all failed and you've all regained the weight, this is a completely different approach. It's so radically different that I have a patent pending on it, and it's all based in gentleness and science. So come try us out. It's a monthly fee, and there's no contract, and we'll take care of you.
I love this so much. I've been to your website and I see that there's plenty of information. I love that there's a community. There's so much that at least go check it out, go explore it and try it, because this is important. Like we said before, good health takes you to wealth. So if that's what you're looking for in general, you can take advantage of them. What are there any other platforms that you would want them to reach you at?
Well, our main website is Processed Food Addiction Consulting to Workplaces. I mean, the processed food industry is draining the profits of other businesses through healthcare costs. We also have a remission community. So people who have been told that, a really difficult disease is incurable, come over and we will teach you all the other modalities that create health that the medical industry isn't providing.
And that is priceless.
Breath work and sound therapy, hot cold therapy, tapping, meditation, visualization, socialization, positive thinking. Those are all approaches to putting diseases into remission, which work great, and the science is there. But it's not a pharmaceutical. And pharmaceutical is how the medical industry makes money. So, yes, we have a very important website called remissionoptimistic.com. The training website is food.
And I will add it to the YouTube as well, so that you guys can go ahead and click on the link and on either link and go right into it. And I appreciate you so much. We've learned a lot.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Absolutely. And
nice
thank you
to meet
all.
you too.
It's been a pleasure. It's been my pleasure. I wish I could have had you here for another hour, but we have to go.
Invite me back. We could talk.
But I would love to.
Yeah.
Yes. I feel that you have
to be here.
I feel that you have very many subjects that we can go in depth into, and really lives are changed one person at a time. So if there's anything that you can learn, even if it's one thing from this podcast, then that will be a lot. Thank you guys for watching another episode or listening to another episode of Successful Quitters. I am Sara Nunez Bee, and I will see you on the next episode.